Tonight on the Late Debate, as the England squad counts down to kick-off, we talk all things Euros and Olympics with a former sports minister who knows all about winning. Plus, will there be a bump in the roadmap? What the uncertainty over June the 21st means for London's entertainment and hospitality industries.
I understand there is a Delta variant now, but there's going to be a variant every month. What can we do? Can we keep opening and close for the next year or 2 years to come? For us, this is not an answer.
Good evening. We're on the eve of a fantastic sporting summer with Euro 2020 kicking off tomorrow night before the Olympics due to start in Tokyo in just 42 days' time. A good time to be talking to someone who knows more than a little about competing and organising at the highest level in international sport. In 1980, Colin Moynihan was a member of the British squad which defied Margaret Thatcher's call for a boycott of the Moscow Olympics.
Cox Colin Moynihan saved the day by getting hold of the rudder bar behind his back with both hands and steering like that for the rest of the course.
Despite a broken rudder, his skill as a rowing cox saw his team win silver.
Good morning. Sorry to trouble you. I'm Colin Moynihan, you're a Conservative man.
3 years later, he was a London MP and, as it turned out, the last Tory to be elected by the voters of Lewisham East. Mrs Thatcher might have been annoyed by his Olympic antics, but that didn't stop him becoming Minister for Sport. He made the role his own, never afraid of photo opportunities, and looked at how to streamline the sporting world.
Too many organisations, I regret to say, governing British sport.
When Italy hosted the World Cup in 1990, England football fans had a notorious reputation abroad. The minister wanted a ban on alcohol sales on match days.
Absolutely essential after the game that we don't have large numbers of fans congregating here with drink widely available.
In the run-up to London 2012, Lord Moynihan was chairman of the British Olympic Association and one of the early backers of a plan to name the Olympic Park after the Queen.
I certainly think that there should be an association with the monarchy in the name. I certainly think there should be association with the Olympics.
As veterans of the Moscow Olympics, Lord Coe and Lord Moynihan campaigned for tougher measures against drugs cheats. But their friendship would later be tested by a bitter row between the BOA and London 2012 over profits from the Games. The Games ended with Team GB achieving an extraordinary third place in the medals table and Lord Moynihan stepping down from his role. Well, joining me in the studio now is Lord Moynihan. Welcome, Colin. That must have taken you back, particularly London 2012, an extraordinary achievement by Team GB. But is it right to say that we've got unfinished business in terms of the legacy, the promise to inspire a generation of youngsters into sport?
I think so. I think firstly, there was a great Games, there's no question, in 2012. Secondly, we had a remarkable urban regeneration legacy of the East End of London, which was accelerated by 10 years because of the Games. But where we didn't deliver is on a sporting legacy for the country as a whole. And that's been borne out by the fact that we've probably got the least fit generation ever. We've got young people coming out with very high levels of obesity at school and mental health challenges. And we've got a lot of facilities which are not up to scratch. And we really need a sort of national plan for sport and recreation coming out of the current COVID crisis in order to give an opportunity to increase sport, physical activity and a healthier lifestyle.
So who's to blame? Was it the Conservative government at the time? You're a Conservative,
it was quite interesting there because there was a major issue during the last Games about the funding of sport moving forward. And I believe then, as I do now, that the Games are about a great event, but they're also about raising the bar for sport in the country. And I really hope now that after COVID, government will get together. I mean, Boris, he enjoyed the Games as Mayor of London in London 2012. He knows how important sport, recreation and an active lifestyle are. And I think it will now become a priority. So I'm quite confident moving forward.
So as we said, we've got a big summer ahead. Do you think the authorities, UEFA, the government, are right to go ahead with big events with crowds albeit limited?
I do. I mean, I think they've been incredibly cautious and they've been right to be. They've had some major test events. They've looked at improving crowd control so that we minimise the chance of infection. We gave a commitment to UEFA that 22,500 would be present. We're now talking about doubling that. There's no firm commitment yet, but things have improved. I mean, the vaccination campaign has been a remarkable success, and I think that we are close to the point at which that decision might be made, and that decision would be beneficial for football fans, the length and breadth of the country.
Do you have any concern, as Unmesh Desai, a Labour member of the London Assembly, said today, that the scheduling of the England-Scotland match next Friday evening at 8 p.m. is basically an invitation for all-day drinking?
I mean, I don't share his view that it's going to be so negative, and so, I think it can be a very positive and great game, and I'm hopeful that it will be well policed, and the fans will want to go about what should be a magnificent celebration of football. But of course there'll be old rivalry coming to the fore, but that's sport.
Having a lot of England fans, a lot of Scotland fans in London all day long, and it's probably going to be a nice day with nothing to do. Slightly worrying, isn't it?
Well, any football match between England and Scotland over the history of football has always seen great rivalry, but we've also seen great camaraderie and great spirit as well. So, you're leading me on a little bit to say that I think it could be a troublesome day. I hope it won't be. I really do hope it won't be, because I think the fact that we got the Euros away is something we should all be celebrating, and I think the fans should be celebrating that as well.
Can I ask you, where do you stand, if that's the right word, on taking the knee?
Yeah, I mean, I respect athletes who want to take the knee. I don't think there's a problem whatsoever in doing so. I regret that there's some booing of it. It's a personal decision, and I think most sports have recognised that it's a personal decision. So I personally might well have done so, but I think in that a major spectator event, a sporting event such as the Olympics, it's more difficult. I mean, you wouldn't want that to happen just before the 100-metre final, because it would be disturbing the preparation of other athletes, and that must come first. But, you might, as an athlete, want to make that mark of respect, and by doing so, the first time you walk into the stadium, you might take a knee, and I have no problem with that.
You've not done it yet. You said you might have done it.
I've not done it yet, and I won't do it in the middle of the show this evening. But I might well have done, because I feel very strongly in sympathy with a lot of the people who do.
So you endorse what Gareth Southgate said?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Sadiq Khan, in the run-up to the mayoral election, proposed making another bid for the Olympics for either 2036 or 2040. The application process has changed somewhat since you were involved in 2012. What do you think London's chances are? Or should we be going this soon after 2012?
Well, by the time we get to 36, it's quite a long time from now. It takes about 7 years. From the time you actually get awarded the Games, you've got 7 years to prepare for them. But of course, the thinking about the process and the bidding took place long before 2005. So Ken Livingstone, I remember, sort of said to us at the British Olympic Association, no, we don't want the established stadia. We want to use it to regenerate the East End of London. And that became the centrepiece of the whole delivery of the Games.
We don't have that this time. I mean, if we use the same venues, we wouldn't have access to the Athletes' Village because it's been turned over to housing. Would that be a bit of a handicap in our bid?
I don't think it'd be a handicap, but I think we would need to focus on alternative legacies. Legacies are really key
strengths, wasn't it, of our bid, that the athletes were next to the stadium. One reason we beat Paris.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, the legacy of the urban regeneration was right up there, as was the legacy for the athletes. I'd like to see a city, hopefully London, come forward and say, we're going to change the whole face of sport, recreation and active lifestyle for all our citizens, the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. And this is how we're going to do it if we win the bid. That's the sort of legacy that I think we missed out on in London 2012 and could be a very powerful point in any bid that London has in the future.
Lord Moynihan, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us this evening.
Thank you.
Now, there are millions of pounds and thousands of jobs in London at stake, depending on whether or not the government lifts COVID restrictions in 11 days' time. The promotional video offers a glimpse into a forgotten world. Before COVID, 500 people a night would crowd into the Cuckoo Club in Mayfair to drink and listen to loud music. Today, the Cuckoo Club is empty and soulless, and Luca, the owner, is angry and frustrated.
We plan to reopen the 21st, so we employed all the staff back. We already prepared a lineup of amazing act and DJ all summer. And now it looks like we need to cancel everything again. Is there going to be an end?
Lee Mead's big break was as Joseph 14 years ago. The singer turned soap star has a live concert tour starting in September. It's already been postponed once because of COVID.
Fortunately, I pulled my tour really early on and we managed to rebook for the end of this year, but there's been hundreds of shows and acts across the country in theatres that couldn't get the slots, and they're now looking in 2022.
With all the uncertainty about social distancing and June the 21st, how frustrating is that?
Well, I guess it's been a big adjustment in terms of your show costs. I mean, I'm a much smaller scale in terms of a big West End musical, but you still got your overheads, and if you're only grossing half capacity, you've got to take that into consideration. So I've got a 4 or 5 piece band on tour, and we've fortunately managed to make it work.
At Smith & Wolensky, the New York steakhouse near the Strand, they're also having to adjust. No one's allowed to sit at the bar. Staff shortages caused by COVID mean managers double up as waiters.
People want to go back to having that chance conversation at the bar, speaking to your bartender about how you like your cocktail made. All of those things are missing. And we would love to see theatres come back to London, tourists to come back to London.
I understand there is a Delta variant now, but there's going to be a variant every month. What can we do? Can we keep opening and close for the next year or 2 years to come? For us, this is not an answer.
Coronavirus has left London's hospitality and entertainment venues in limbo, and the uncertainty over June the 21st isn't helping. Hoping to throw some light on what all this means for London are the Labour MP for Feltham and Heston, Seema Malhotra, for the Conservatives, the Croydon South MP Chris Philp, and joining us from Cornwall is the Green Party co-leader and Lambeth councillor Jonathan Bartley. Welcome all of you. Chris Philp, what do you think the Prime Minister is going to tell us on Monday?
Well, look, he's going to look carefully at all the evidence, he's going to look at the data, and he's going to make a judgment call to try and open up as quickly as we possibly can as per the roadmap, but he's got to take into account the risks, and this new variant, the Delta variant, is causing concern. We're seeing an increase in cases, we're seeing an increase in hospitalisations to an extent as well, and the Prime Minister has to do the responsible thing and just weigh up the risks and do the right thing for the country, as he's done for the last year. Look, I really hope we can open up as quickly as possible for all the reasons people said on that clip, but we've come so far, we are now so close, we don't want to jeopardise our health and our safety at this very last moment. But look, I hope we can get to the point where we can open. The vaccine programme is the key that unlocks the door. We've now got, I think, 41 million, or very nearly 41 million first doses administered. 77% have had at least one dose. It's a race, as the Prime Minister has said, between the variant and the vaccine. The vaccine is, racing ahead, but we just need to make sure we don't jump too soon. So it's a judgment he'll make, and we'll find out in the next few days.
Seema, caution is the right way forward?
It's absolutely right that it has to be led by the data, and there's been some worrying trends in the last 7 days of increased cases and some increased
particularly
in
out
death
in your
rates.
part of West
But
London.
I'm really concerned that we don't see a repeat of a situation that in my view has been made by ministerial incompetence. I mean, people are angry that not locking down some of the borders earlier on, making sure that we had quarantine for those returning, for example, from India, when there were signs very early on, delays that resulted again in the situation that we face now. And Hounslow, where I am, has also seen it becoming a sort of surge testing area and increased vaccinations. Now, those are important. Chris is right that what we've got to see is the acceleration of vaccinations and testing. But there is another point here, which is that businesses cannot be left to pay for the mistakes made by government, which has resulted in some
so
of
you're
the
after lots of compensation.
Well, what I think is important, and this has come from discussions with the hospitality sector as well. There's a debate today in Parliament on aviation, which really affects jobs in my constituency, to make sure that there are economic measures and business support that is paired with any change to the government's plans. That's absolutely critical, because what we've seen before is that the economic measures lag, which means uncertainty for businesses. You've heard tonight from the Nighttime Industries Association, they plan 2 or 3 weeks in advance. They need more notice, and they cannot be left to pay the price for government incompetence.
Jonathan, Luca's right, the businessman we heard who runs the nightclub. Businesses can't go on like this, can they?
They can't, and I'm wondering when politicians are going to wake up and level with the public that the world has changed, and we need to recognise that. And it isn't just about having that silver bullet of the vaccine. It's about still 18 months into this, having a test and trace and isolate system that actually works at the local level, and with people being adequately compensated when they need to isolate. We had Dido Harding back in February telling House of Commons Select Committee that 20,000 people weren't still, even in that context, isolating. We still haven't cracked this. So yes, vaccination is a vital weapon, but it's not the only weapon. We have to have a test, trace and isolate system, not just for now, not just for the next few months, but for the next few years, because we are going to have to live with COVID and variants and potentially other pandemics that come down the line. They're going to come down the line. We don't know when, but they will eventually.
Chris,
and we need resilient economies so businesses can be protected and can have that certainty and security that everyone wants them to have.
Chris, you spoke about the figures for vaccinations. Jonathan Bartley made a fair point there, that there are other things like test and trace that the government still needs to address.
Well, I mean, the test and trace system is roaring ahead as well. We're doing huge numbers of tests across the country, both the regular tests and all the PCR tests and the lateral flow tests as well, which have very, very quick results. But look, the vaccination programme is ultimately what is going to protect us. And we've got we can be incredibly proud in this country. We have got a world-leading vaccination programme with, as I said earlier, 41 million people now with the first vaccination, and that is ultimately what will enable us to reopen businesses and get life back to normal. So we should get behind that.
Do people in your constituency endorse what Chris is saying about the government's handling of the vaccination programme?
Well, I will say that I work very closely with our NHS locally, with NHS across London and NHS nationally. We've had always briefings in which we've also shared what isn't working well and where there needs to be ideas that are community-led. And I think the government took far too long to realise that the solution has to be community-led, to how to reach out into communities that haven't also taken up the vaccine. So the pop-up vaccinations that we've seen, I've seen them in Hounslow, have been incredibly successful. You've seen now people that have been, perhaps older generations that were vaccine hesitant coming in with younger generations. And that has been important in making sure that we build that resistance in our communities. But I think there's another important point here, which is about making sure that we've got the means, the financial means for people to self-isolate, tackling the issues that the excluded that are still facing, so they're not caught between feeding their families and self-isolating if they test positive. That still hasn't been cracked, and it's a nut that we must deal with. The Chancellor must now really focus in on that so that it doesn't lend itself to another wave. That's the worst thing. We cannot see a new wave in autumn, winter. We've got to avoid that. And the government will be held to account for that.
You mentioned the aviation industry a little earlier. This afternoon, the former Prime Minister Theresa May gave the government something of a telling off over its handling of the aviation situation. Here's what she had to say.
We now have over 50% of the adult population vaccinated, a wonderful programme. Yet we're more restricted on travel than we were last year. Last year in 2020, I went to Switzerland in August, South Korea in September. There was no vaccine, travel was possible. This year there is a vaccine, travel is not possible. I really don't understand the stance the government is taking.
Chris, answer your former leader.
Well, since last year, we've seen a second wave take off in the late autumn after the time that Theresa May was talking about there in December and through January, February. We've seen what these new variants can do. It was the Kent variant back in December. We've seen the Delta variant more recently. We've seen what these variants do. And these variants are brought in from overseas, and that is why these travel restrictions are in place. But the solution, as I said before, is the vaccine programme. It is a fantastic British success story, and that is what will get us out of the pandemic and get our lives back to normal. Our border measures are amongst the most stringent in the world: the red list, amber list and green list, the various passenger locator form, the quarantine, the testing requirements. All of those things are designed to keep us safe from new variants. But once we get the vaccine fully rolled out, that will, I think, address the problem. So I would just take this opportunity to urge everybody in London, across the country, when you're offered the vaccine, please take it. If you're not vaccinated,
ask you briefly,
get it done.
Do you think Londoners can look forward to foreign holidays this summer at any point?
Look, I don't want to get into speculation about how this pandemic's going to unfold. The one thing we should have learned by now, is not to make predictions about how it's going to unfold. But look, we are, I think, getting very close to the end of this roadmap now. The vaccination programme is almost there, so let's make sure these last people that need to be vaccinated get the vaccines.
Let's be clear, the government has not had a coherent plan for how we unlock the economy, how we have safe international travel.
We've got a really clear roadmap. It could hardly be clearer. It's crystal clear.
I know this, Chris, because I've been raising this with the government since last April about how we're going to have a plan for safe international travel, and that isn't giving the impression that it's driven by politics more than it is about public safety, because that is the big question about the rise of the Delta variant and how it has happened. And it is interesting, isn't it, that Joe Biden has come to the UK, and what is going to be on discussion is how we reopen safely travel between the UK and the US, which I think is incredibly important, to do so safely with what we've learned about what works.
Seema, can I bring in Jonathan Bartley here from Cornwall? Jonathan, as a Green Party co-leader, as a Green member, you presumably aren't too disappointed that air travel hasn't started up again.
Well, look, we're not fundamentalist about this. Everyone likes a holiday. Our proposal is not to ban flying completely. It's more the frequent flyers that we know we need to address. But let's not forget that last summer we made that colossal, or the government made that colossal, monumental mistake of opening up way too quickly. And we've got to recognise again that the world has changed, that international travel is going to be different for many months and years to come. And the government needs to get on board with that. And that the rush is to return to business as usual. Even in this whole debate, it's about return to business as usual. We're flying, return to business as usual. Look, the world has changed. And we're going to have to adapt and change the way we travel, the way we do business, the way we live, the way we work. And the sooner that the government grasps that, and it isn't just about doing the vaccinations, important though that is, everyone should be getting vaccinated, absolutely want to reinforce that message. But the government needs to recognise that the world has changed and the way we live needs to change. And until we crack that, I'm afraid we're going to have a very, very bumpy ride for months and years to come. And that includes over international travel by air.
Seema, is Andrew Lloyd Webber, Lord Lloyd Webber, right to threaten to break the law if he can't open his theatres?
Well, I'm not going to advocate anybody breaking the law because this is about safety. But what I will say is that we want to see domestic tourism where we can safely unlock. And I think these are the tests to the government, how we can keep the public safe, but where we can move towards unlocking with the measures from what we've learned when we've been having events starting with different numbers. What have we learned from that experience? That's what the government was doing those pilots for. I want to see programmes like Sadiq Khan's Let's Do London, which is about opening up our culture and for domestic tourism and for Londoners to enjoy London again, is given the support that it needs, because that will help our economy,
London's
our
going to need a big
recovery
shot in the arm, isn't
well.
it, with encouraging people back?
Well, look, I mean, the entire economy has had a big shot in the arm. We've invested £300 billion or more over the last year in keeping our economy going and keeping families going as well. A huge investment, and we do need to get business back up and running, and that's why, I mean, just to repeat the point again, the vaccine programme will enable us to do that. And ultimately the way we're going to create prosperity and get business back up and running isn't by continually handing out grants. That was necessary in the crisis, but that is not sustainable. We need to get businesses operating again on a profitable and a sustainable basis.
But
that is the future.
The vaccination is not the only answer to this. And let's say this as well, because it's important. There's a risk of a perfect storm for businesses. In 2 weeks'
Seema,
time, quarterly rents are going to need to be paid.
I'm going to have to stop you there because we have run out of time. I'm sorry about that, but thank you to all my guests tonight, to Colin, to Seema, Chris and Jonathan. I'll be here next month with another edition of The Late Debate. Until then, thank you for watching and good night.